you're listening. Whoa. Sing it back. Whoa. Strap on together, unwind.
Welcome to another episode of Trouble Performing, a series of salon-style conversations discussing issues in contemporary live art practices. It's hosted by PULSAR, that's Tiff Robinette, and Ian DeLeon, which is me. This episode is brought to you once again by Incident Magazine and was recorded on April 17th, 2016 at the home of Ming Liu. For this episode, we were joined by Mike and Amy of Wild Torus, Esther Neff of Panoply, Màirèad Delaney, coming to us via Ireland and Vermont, Ray Goodwin from Kentucky, Kaya Gilgy, Ernest Goodmaw, Jill McDermott and Eric Hokinson of Gray Space, Danny Gonzalez and Hannes Paldrock, coming from Oklahoma and Estonia, and both from Grata, Mitchell Murdoch, Ming Liu, Eric Letourneau, coming to us via Montreal, Hilary Sand, David Legacia, Hui Se, Olivia Kofi, and Aramayani, coming from Indonesia. Work discussed in this conversation include recent performance by Wild Torus and Non-Grata at the New York Anarchist Book Fair, Madison Young's recent performance at Grace Exhibition Space, Màirèad Delaney and Ray Goodwin's performance at Panoply Performance Lab a few nights ago, a performance by Agrofem called Material Labor from several months ago, as well as a performance by Olivia Kofi at Huese's house. During our conversation, a quote from the writing of Màirèad Delaney, which was read out loud by David Legacia, emerged as a phrase which would guide and frame a lot of our discussions. That phrase, embodied understanding, was used to differentiate between performances that use spectacle as a form of audience alienation and more productive uses which create empathy in the viewer. Okay, alright, so this thing is recording now. Just like a few quotes and little framing ideas to get us started. But then after I say these, anybody wants to jump in and talk about any of these things, any of these recent performances people have seen or anything else, feel free. The first one is, this is a performance artist from New York back in the 70s, Christopher D'Arcangelo. He says, when any work is open to the public, it is open to physical discourse. That's something that we're kind of taking really seriously with PULSAR and this kind of expression of physical discourse. And then the other, this kind of playful quote from Baudrillard asks, what are you doing after the orgy? And it's a kind of examination of the spectacle of banality, whether or not what our contemporary culture, and this applies to performance as well, I think sometimes is often like an kind of indulging of the spectacle of banality. That's something that I'm interested just kind of have in the air for us to discuss. And then for specific topics, something that's come up with us a lot is this idea of ideology versus aesthetics, and talking about what happens when content gets surpassed by identity questions with performance. So this kind of thing where what a person's background is, where they're coming from, becomes more important than the content, the aesthetics of what they're producing. So that's a question. The other is to fuck or not to fuck. And this is a kind of conversation about the eroticizing gaze and whether or not that is a universal kind of barometer that people apply not just to performance but to life in general. The entertainment factor, which is what we're calling this consideration of the audience by the performer. So what happens when you have a certain kind of performance coming on like a Friday or a Saturday night when people have just gotten off of a long week of work and they're kind of in this mode, this evening mode that's traditionally has been reserved for like more entertainment style activities, and then you get something that's kind of really draining and demanding for the audience. In other words, maybe something boring. And then another thing, nudity in performance, whether less is still more. The naked body as a crutch. Ideas to throw out there. All right. Something on any of those things, or something completely different?
I agree.
I think entertainment is an interesting topic to start with, where
Yeah.
are you more inclined as a performer to want to entertain so that people will want to come back and see more?
I think there are two predominating answers to that question. There are two predominating answers to that question that I've experienced in talking to performers. There are some people who do have entertainment, or maybe three actually, I think that. We do have entertainment as a locus. And then there are people who deliberately try to make things that make audience uncomfortable, trying to perhaps like expand their experience, the audience experience, by forcing or imposing some kind of rigid either ideology or aesthetic. And then there are also people who do things that are mostly just about their experience. It's like, I'm doing this because I am seeking to have some sort of particular mental state achieved, or like I have an idea that I want to explore myself. So I guess the 3 points, right? Pushing away, closing down to yourself, or like trying to extend some kind of arm.
And they're all entertaining, you think? Or they're
Only one of those I think would fit into the definition of entertaining, the like extension, right? Where you like are deliberately creating a bridge using entertainment as a mode for the extension to occur, I guess.
to be accessible, you must be entertaining.
Not necessarily.
Well,
That is one way to be accessible.
I think this question came up for us specifically with the recent Madison Young performance at Grace. So if anybody wants to talk about it specifically through that lens, like we had this feeling that it was a very challenging performance for the audience. And just thinking about the placement of it in like the work week, at the end of a work week, and audiences maybe just stamina or just like level of willingness to give so much might have been at odds with what the artist wanted. That's kind of an idea that we had.
Yeah. Earlier you said challenging as in like boring. Right? So is that kind of, because I mean, there's going to be lots of ways of challenging, but mainly boring. Right?
I don't know if boring is quite the right word. It expected a lot of us to remain still for a very long time.
Was that
very, very quiet.
part of the performance?
It was part
You
of
had
the,
to stay still.
that was the audience's vibe. You know, you get into a space and you can kind of tell what the performer wants out of the audience, and so then you try to give it. But then in a piece that's like an hour long and you don't even feel like you have the space to like creep to the bathroom without being really disruptive, it's a bit difficult.
Like it demanded undivided attention for over an hour.
Was there some sort of like connection, or did you feel like it was more like one-sided?
Oh no, I just want to say that I found it interesting. I guess it's not the word on par of entertaining, but I found it interesting because I saw her perform kind of the same performance 2 years ago in a very different context. She wasn't pregnant. It was more erotic based, and she used a different material. Some kind. 2 years ago, she had like this rash, and so she had this bomb on her. But it's different now. This one, she used honey. and she's pregnant, and it was more, I felt, kind of the same performance, only I guess two different contexts as well. She's going to be a mother soon, and so it has more of this mother context to it.
But is that something we're just reading into it because she is pregnant, and maybe it has nothing to do with that piece at all?
That's
Like,
certainly true.
what if she had recently had like a surgery and had a scar on her, but the piece has nothing to do with that?
I think there were two things that were challenging about the work, and one of them is what you were talking about, the demand for absolute attention and for like your own physical sublimation almost to the piece itself. And then the other challenge was, this is a pregnant body, and is that body desexualized? Is it more sensual? Is this like creation force somehow altering her physical identity? And like you could kind of feel, and I was sort of medium paying attention to like other people a little bit, somewhat, and you could kind of feel like men were getting like weirdly turned on, but then kind of just like checking themselves. It was I don't have like a specific example, but like it was pretty apparent, and there was like some nervous laughter sometimes when she was doing more like sensual acts, which I found really interesting, because there was that, despite the contract with the audience and the performance itself, there was this like, I'm a little uncomfortable with this. There was this note of discomfort, not just like physical and not being able to produce sound or move, but also like essentially how is this body meant to be? How is it being presented? Even it was ambiguous.
Well, I want to clarify that the performance 2 years ago had audience participation as well, so it's different. But it was very much clearly erotic to create pleasure and masturbation, basically.
Do you think,
Audience masturbation or audience masturbation?
Like she was masturbating herself.
Okay.
well, bringing it to the idea of entertainment, do people do erotic performance more because they know people will like you and come and they'll get more support and it keeps it going? Is that for entertainment as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think the theme, I know that Jill and Hoke are not here, but I noticed that the theme was to have feminists. The title of the series of performances is 21 Suffragettes, and so this is supposed to be a representation, of contemporary feminism, which by all means I didn't see the performance, but sounds like it's pretty erotic and contemporary, and then the fact that she's pregnant, I find that pretty interesting. So, but I think to think about it, and then like, what is this word like feminism? And then we went to the performance, not when Madison was performing, but the other week before that, and it was all men performing for these women's kind of roles, kind of like feminine men.
That was the Chicago group.
Yeah, it was a queer.
The piece about Alan Turing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it was
Adam
theater.
R.
Yeah.
Adam R.
It was
Okay, there.
theater, true.
Hope and Jill. We are discussing your.
We're discussing
Space.
20 suffragists.
Oh, cool. And we couldn't remember the name of the last.
The queer
I don't know.
performance.
We couldn't remember the name.
Of what?
The last one before Madison Young.
Adam R. from
Adam
Chicago?
R. And his theater group.
I don't know if he'd call it a theater group.
All right.
And
Well, it's his performance group. Yeah.
But Amy, were you finished with your
Yeah,
about the series?
Well, just transitioning from Madison to Adamar, and then whatever else was in kind of the gray space programming this season in relation to 21 suffragettes and the fact that this is all a representation of kind of feminine issues, or I mean, maybe it's not 21 suffragettes, could mean something else, but yeah, it seemed like different what we saw with Adamar compared to Madison, which we didn't see.
Something that might be coming up in our talk about that performance specifically, like, do people think that maybe the artist's idea that her actions being done in the nude might comprise this level of, I don't know, taboo or excitement that maybe our community doesn't actually respond to anymore?
Yeah.
To a nude body?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think
Or
that
more specific?
I mean, you have to think like, with what purpose is the nude body there? Is it with a purpose? Like, yeah, like, are you trying to like, titillate, or is that for another reason that you happen to be, whatever the performance happens to be, it requires you to like get yourself to that position of being nude. And it's less about what you're trying to, and like in our circles, in our day and age, it's like not very titillating. You can do a lot of things without like really shocking people. So I don't think
But
that's.
when you bring in outsiders, like I always try to drag my like non-performance friends to
Wow.
particularly straight, what I know are going to be particularly like uncomfortable performance art events. Because it's so fascinating to see like someone's first experience of like, oh my god, I saw 17 naked people tonight.
Right.
It's so interesting because
Yeah.
we really don't. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
okay,
But even in that case, you come to like 2 or 3 of these events, and then it's like.
and then it's all
Yeah,
bad.
and it's just, so, yeah, I think if you are, like, still trying to, do a sexual performance just for the hell of it, it's not really gonna do much. So,
Maybe it doesn't have to do with sexuality. or-
Interject?
Yeah, sure.
But is being nude titillating and sexual in nature? Because
I don't.
it seems to me that I'm seeing maybe mostly women in the room, and I think that's something that makes us uncomfortable, is that we can't be just nude in our bodies without it being sexualized, and we're trying to say something beyond that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely like based on perspective. Like it's all up to the individual who's viewing these performances.
I
Like
think that the artist is a lot like they have a voice and they're trying to communicate
Oh,
something.
definitely.
And so
I believe
it's
it
up for
can be a form
interpretation
of-
to decide that what the artist is trying to say is kind of irrelevant, and it's just up to each person in the audience to decide what the artist is saying.
But I guess it's hard for the control what the audience will read into what they're seeing.
That's why making art is hard.
I think to us, like, in our performance and, like some other performers, it's like political. Like, nudity is political, as in, you are...
Us being wild Torus.
Exactly. And yeah, it's by, we're talking about control, we're talking about, these systems of society and sort of like the prescriptions of clothing and how, how it creates inequality and all that, and freedom of, like freedom to not have to worry about being sexualized, and freedom to just be yourself and be naked. So yeah, I think it's like very political in this culture because we are so, as a culture, we're uncomfortable with it very much, and it's used as control, like individual.
And to build off that specifically in reference to Madison's piece, we're also like, there's a lot of like heteronormative nudity, right? But then like, well, I can't even remember if it's Facebook or Twitter or whatever, won't let women post photos of themselves breastfeeding.
Yeah, or menstruation.
Like,
or,
come on.
Yeah.
Come the fuck on. We all did that, unless our moms were like, now you're not fucking out my tits.
Right.
That's like, that's something that's perfectly natural.
Yeah.
And I actually found Madison's performance very meditative and like very relaxing, and I didn't really find the nudity to be, despite the like smearing of honey and whatever all over her body, I really didn't find it to be sexualized from my perspective or experience of it.
No.
I think
found
she
it,
did 2 years ago,
Yeah.
which
Jonah
wasn't
talked
exactly,
about
it was
this,
like,
yeah.
didn't seem to be focused on sexualized, but she was all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's like also another thing. It's like normalization of sexuality. So also, yeah, also it's like not necessarily have to sexualize people, but also be free with your sexuality and not like obey societal prescriptions of what can you do and with women.
I mean, I don't think that like nudity should be sexualized, and as long as the performance, unless the content of the performance kind of backs up that type of like mentality of sexuality. It's like a naked body is just, to me it's art. It's beautiful. It's the beautiful lines, slender figures, or even big voluptuous figures. But if you're up there, you're up on stage, you're naked, and you're jerking off. Obviously there's a sexual tone to it. But I didn't see the performance, so I'm not quite sure. I would say like in where I'm from in Oklahoma, the Midwest Bible Belt, it is a very big deal when someone's naked. People come to a performance and they see someone take off their clothes. It's a huge statement. Because for the people that are in my environment, in the Midwest, it's just like, oh, that's it's unclean, it's unpure. You gotta like cover your shame, basically. I for one feel that nudity can be used in so many different dynamics, to reach audiences in so many different types of ways that, just to see, she's naked and she's covering herself in honey. To me, I wouldn't think it's sexual just by imagining it, unless that she was like making it blatantly obvious that it was, this form of like sexuality and seductiveness. But again, like I said, I didn't witness it, so it's just speculation.
I want to follow up and
Wait.
Yeah.
How many people here saw Madison's
I saw them both.
Okay.
About half the group raised their
Okay.
hands.
So if you're about to move on to something else,
No, I'm going to follow up on it. It's going to be on the same subject.
We can bounce around.
Yeah, we're going to
Bounce
talk
around.
about I think going back to this idea of, entertainment, I think he brings up a good point of not just content, but space and place of where the performance is. Like I said, like it's been talked about, nudity in, let's say, a New York gallery is desensitized to people who know these things, but if somebody in Oklahoma saw these things, it would be have more, let's say, impact, maybe, let's say, politically, or if you'll have more different engagement by the audience.
And should that be something that the artist is thinking of right at the beginning,
Yeah,
in the conceptualization of the piece, knowing the context is going to be placed in?
Yeah, space is
Where you are.
space is 100% important to where-
Hopefully.
It was like whenever I started doing performance art, the first time I got naked, it wasn't about me trying to be like this sexual being. Like, honestly, to me, it was a form of, pushing myself out of my comfort zone and like gaining power, gaining confidence in myself. But as it's gone by, as the time has gone by, and we've done more and more performances, it has become a tool that I use to kind of wake people up. And I agree with what he was saying. It does depend on where you're at, like what the venue is, what state, what city, because I feel that pushing the envelope of nudity should be something that is done, and I don't think it becomes taboo until it is, regularly, accepted in the community. I guess in the performance art community, it's something that we see a lot more, than, obviously like music and stuff. Like, but I feel like there's an evolution of nudity that happens as a performer, you know, and I'm just speaking about myself and like my journey, you know, but I can definitely see how nudity, especially with how the majority of society views the naked body, is just like sexualized right immediately. It's like, oh, she's naked, this is sexy. Or he's naked, oh, this is sexy. You know, but I think it's a great idea to continue to push that. You know, because once someone sees a naked body for so long, you know, it becomes a normality that I feel people can adopt.
How,
15 things to say about it.
I'm just curious, how many performers here have done nude performances?
I can't remember if I have.
Majority of the room raising the hand.
You sort of have to at least once.
So since we're talking about sight too, I live in Kentucky, and I have to say the first time I really engaged in nude work was this summer at Essential Departures at Rosekill. And one of the reasons I had been hesitant to do so is because I work in academia, and I did not want to have documentation of that work anywhere that could compromise my way of making a living, honestly. And so I think it's kind of liberating at this point now that I have tenure, so I can engage in it. But the work we were doing this summer was interactive and collaborative, dealing with the female nude body in performance art and in landscape, and it was non-sexual. Even though we were looking at genitalia and breasts, and we were talking about regarding someone with a neutral gaze, and how do you do that as a participant, as an audience member? How do you look at another human? And yet we're all very curious about each other's bodies, right? Because we're all naked underneath our clothes. Yeah.
I have such a good follow-up. Wait, no, this is really perfect though. My first naked experience was in a class. The professor had one class that was completely optional. You didn't have to come. It was not part of your grade. Nothing counted against you if you didn't want to do it. But everyone was naked the entire time. The entire class. This is a bunch of like 21, 22-year-olds in college. Everyone naked. And the lights were dim, so it wasn't like super exposed. But it was so relaxing. And it was like one of the best experiences I've ever had. It was just like total group nude. It was wonderful.
But I work at a university where if a student has a real issue with going to a class where there are nude models and drawing from a nude model, they can exempt out of that class.
Of course. And actually,
which I think is stupid.
Last year, this professor came under fire. He was all over Fox News. This is at UCSD. I don't know if anybody remembers that happening like last year, maybe the year before. But he was under fire because of this class, because there was a student who got upset and went to actually their mom went and talked to the dean of the college and was like, this is unbelievable, I can't believe you're forcing nudity on my daughter. And it's like, actually it's completely optional, it doesn't affect your grade at all. I don't know where the hell you got any of your facts, but none of them are facts. And it was fascinating when that happened. It was like a very liberating experience for me, but for this other person, years later, was like antagonistic.
Jill, are you going to say something?
Well, yeah, because with putting it in the context of a gallery in Oklahoma, and it's really shocking there, but then you put it in a gallery in Brooklyn where it's become so commonplace to see someone doing a piece in the nude. It's also known as body art, so the body is really important to the work I think that most of us are making. And when you cover it, that's something else. So the body, if you want to present body art, you're going to use your body. And when you're doing it in Brooklyn, you've seen it so many times, it's become kind of passé. Then I would think the conversation can get past the fact that she was nude. And I came in late, so I don't know if you all brought up the fact that she's pregnant.
Yeah.
Yes. And that she was using honey. And why was she using honey? It wasn't for sexual reasons. And then she wrote the word love on there, and this is her second child.
I didn't see that.
It's big letters across the top of the page, love. And then she moved very slowly, and honey moved slowly, and she wanted time to move slow. She wanted New Yorkers to slow down. This is a body of a woman who's already had a baby, who's in the process of having another baby. And it was all about love and slowing down and nurturing yourself and loving the baby that you have and the baby that's growing inside of you. I guess I'm thinking that if we get past the shock of the fact that she's naked, and I don't think it's so shocking to us necessarily, and we can talk about all the other elements that she was bringing in.
Yeah, I don't think anybody really expressed the shock of
Well,
the
that's
nudity.
what I heard.
We were using
Mike
it.
was saying this shock and.
Or just kind
Not
of
in
like a
relation to
jump
that
off.
performance.
Yeah.
We're just talking about
Yeah.
nudity in general.
Like a jump off from, like, that's the last thing we saw where someone was naked.
But she was pregnant. To me, the fact
Yeah.
that she was pregnant, nude and pregnant, is more interesting than just.
I
she
think-
was
But we
vulnerable.
were also talking about just like taking all of those things into consideration, yes, but then also looking just at the form of it as a performance and what were aspects of it that worked for people and which weren't, and why were those things. Well, that's how we began the conversation in terms of like what it required of the audience and what happens if the audience just isn't willing to slow down.
We're talking
What
about
was your-
Well, it seems like what all I've heard talking about is that she was nude. Since I came in, I haven't heard anyone say that she was pregnant.
Well, I was
We-
talking
we
about that
did.
earlier.
Yeah,
okay.
But we were talking about this. We're talking about the structure of naked art with Madison's piece as an example.
Mhm.
Not so much diving into like analysis of her
Right.
work specifically, but we're just using that because it does, like, half the room did see the performance,
Still
so it's just a helpful jumping off. But we were talking earlier about pregnant body, or I was, but about pregnant body, and I was saying that piece actually for me was very meditative, and it was not about nudity in any way. She was naked, but that was like as far as that went. Esther likes to always make this delineation, or not always, but she has a couple of times in conversation made a delineation between naked and nude, and I think that Madison is another like perfect nude in a way, because she is just that, and it's, or not, I mean, just is a terrible word, but like that is simply what is happening. It is not colluded by like some other impulse until it is received in the mind of audience members, right?
And then her pregnancy was a thing that people got really hung up on.
Yeah.
And I talked to one girl who's not here. I didn't know her, but she was just like, "Oh my God, I have never seen a pregnant naked woman," and which is like completely blew her mind that people are pregnant and they can be naked and then you can see them.
To be more like naked.
Yeah, and so, but I mean, it was I was like, what? Because I've seen so many naked pregnant women.
I haven't.
In photos,
And-
maybe.
I haven't.
Yeah,
I
I
haven't.
know, like
I
I've just
haven't
been
seen
around so
my
many
friend.
pregnant women, so I was like, yeah, they, you're pregnant and you can be naked too. So for me, when I first saw it, I was like, okay, so this is a piece about pregnancy, and then I was like, wait a second, why am I putting this on this performance? Maybe it's not about pregnancy. Maybe it's really about her text, which has nothing to do with the fact that, or maybe a little bit, but not really the focus that she is a pregnant woman. I think we can get like caught up in little things about a person's body and think they're about that thing because we can see them. When they're wearing clothes, we can't see them. And that's the thing about nudity, where like sometimes the shape of your body or the progress you're in, or if you have a rash or if you have something weird going on, it can be read in as content, even when it's not content necessarily.
It sounds like a kind of, I didn't see Madison's performance, but the Karen Finley sort of honey, wrap all over a woman's body, and then in that case, I guess, people were, getting it off of her, or like licking, or like putting their fingers in, and then in Madison's, it seems like, this is me, I put honey on my own body, and you all just have to watch, and I'm pregnant, so, and it's like 2016 compared to, I don't know, in Karen Finley exactly, but some time ago, so maybe the politics, local message was a little different, but maybe she was like directly referencing this Karen Finley piece and being like kind of a repetition, but also different.
A lot of people also brought up that it seemed more like or it seemed like the performer had been attuned to performing more for camera than for a live audience. So there was like some compositional things in terms of her body and the audience that were a little challenging for the audience to like receive all of what was
You
going
and I
on.
talked about this because yes, we did. I remember the whole conversation because I remember everything like an elephant, even when I'm drunk. We had a long conversation about this where I had a friend behind her, and so for like 20 minutes, and he like rarely comes to performance events, but I'm really happy when he does come because it's awesome that like somebody who's more a writer comes to performance events and gets something out of it. But he was behind her, and I was in front of her when she did her really slow, like putting on the honey and like her body sticking to itself, and I kept being like, shit, he can't see any of this, like people didn't move around to the front so that they could see what was happening. But then I talked to you, and she was making direct eye contact with you during that part of the performance.
And we were breathing together.
And you're breathing together.
And we
So
both
she was
started to
making
smile at one point, which was really
she was making really intense contact with some people, and then other people were left behind, literally behind her. And maybe there's like a thing in performance where like just in audience structure where we have this idea that like once you plop yourself down somewhere you can't move, and that's like a theater thing that we have where you go to the theater and you're like, I don't like my seat anymore. You can't just like get up and walk to another seat.
But that sounds kind of strange because a lot of performances, I mean, yes, sometimes you feel like, okay, you can't move. Then you sort of realize, okay, I can't see anything, so you still kind of just like, I can
Some
move,
people
you know.
feel like they can do that, and then other people like don't feel like they can do that.
I like to move around in a performance.
Yeah.
You get different angles and perspectives on the same
Well,
action.
how much of that depends on like the artist though, like and what is the artist doing? And like you said, like there was this expectation, sort of unsaid expectation of nobody really moving, or everybody being like super still and super like. But like it's interesting to me how like all of a sudden like everyone felt that expectation, and how much of what the artist was doing like was influencing that, or
It's a really interesting consideration, which like we as performers, everybody pretty much in here is performance artists.
And this is
you really have to consider, because you don't want to leave anybody behind necessarily, like not on purpose.
So I guess it goes like to like a broader question is like how much are you concerned about the audience and sort of their experience, their like how much of it is. How much of the performance planning is like you looking at it from the viewpoint of the audience? Right.
Yeah. When some people get like this amazing experience, and then other people don't like.
And as an artist, you like choose to follow and not follow a certain idea because of like how you think it will, how important it is to like how the audience feels.
Maybe a good transition into Màirèad and Ray's performance from last night, in how you all considered the audience and gave the audience a lot of agency in relation to your performance. Anybody else wants to kind of touch on that? I know David had a lot of strong feelings about it.
No, you were
in a good way.
Before this all started, you had this really great. What were you saying before we were recording this?
Oh, that I felt like the piece wasn't durational in the sense that we usually think of it. For me, and I am very happy about that. Like for me, durational is this very monotonous action that I often can't deal with, and maybe that's just my thing, that I'm not really willing to slow down, and I don't want to do that as an audience member. But you all did a piece that had duration, like everything had, and it was 3 hours. But it felt like it was so dynamic that you were almost doing like 70 or 80 different performances. I don't know, everything was like really fresh, and that was because of how you used the audience, which was, maybe you can talk about it more than me, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it was called Under Bell, and we were thinking about bells as marking time in prisons and churches and schools and of a worker shift or curfew or marking a release. So both control and something that you anticipate. And we had an assortment of bells, which we asked the audience to ring when they wanted to stop and start our labor. And we had different sort of very vaguely set out tasks that changed as we executed them. And there was a lot of improvisation.
So the audience wasn't picking up the bells, so we handed the bells out to people, and then there were signs in the space cluing people into stop and start our action with the sound, stop and start our labor with the sound of the bell. And it took the audience a little while to kind of clue into it and to recognize that we really did give them agency to stop and start our labor. And so when someone in the audience rang the bell, we would stop what we were doing and shift to another task. And we had stations or areas set up in the space with these different tasks. And then we were improving with the materials and some predetermined actions.
Oh, yeah, David.
I think concerning your thoughts, I think most original work I've seen is you have this person doing this action and it's set in this area and they're just going to do their thing. And it's not really, and you stand there for 20 minutes or 5 minutes or an hour or however long you want. And you just stand there. You don't really have that much involvement. I think in this case, with this performance was the audience had involvement in helping stop and start the actions. Sometimes they would ring a bell and then, it would go on for like 5 or 10 minutes and it would be the same action. Or it would be like, I don't want to see that anymore. I'm just going to ring it again real quick.
The audience also was very caring for both of you, and they stopped you when things were getting too dangerous.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting
There was one part when you're like on top of the chair and or the table, you're rocking back and forth. And I'm just thinking, that's going to break any second.
Well, there's another moment that I think complemented that, where this was like at least 3/4 of the way into the performance, when you both were leaning on each other. You were both leaning on each other, and I could see in the audience, like, some people were reaching for the bell, and others were like, don't. It was a very tender moment that was like, there was the element of theater where it's like, okay, cut that shit out right now. But then there were the moments of extreme chemistry.
It was right after a really intense, I don't even remember which, it might have been when you guys were like really kind of fighting almost with the rope, the tug of war situation. And then the audience was literally just like, no, let's just give them a minute. Let's just give them a minute.
That's what I'm working out a little bit.
That was intense. which is actually interesting because the audience is also giving themselves a break from that like emotional intensity that you were demanding they experience by watching your somewhat dangerous behaviors. Like you probably knew sort of the limits of the things that you had brought with you. So there's maybe a hidden Then there's that, which I get. They both shook their heads. They did not know what would break and what wouldn't. But yeah, it was interesting. There was definitely a contract, like almost parental in a way. Like the audience is sitting, observing, and then there's like a moment when it's like, no, this is too much. Calm down, children. Stop it. Dig. That was a dig.
In a way, the audience was very much controlling their rhythm. It would go into very more kinetic actions, and then you would go and like hug each other, or you would go like sit in a chair by the audience and lean on somebody. It would be, in that way, the audience very much had this way of not manipulating, but like controlling the rhythm of what was happening.
And sometimes every once in a while it would be like, oh no, like they were just getting somewhere with their action, and somebody cut it short, and that's the danger. It's double-edged sword, because in some ways it was amazing. Like I thought the bells were great, and And especially the 3-hour durational, how are you going to keep people engaged and feeling participatory without actually inviting them up to like wrestle with you guys?
This is more of a question of.
But yeah, every once in a while I'd be like, that wasn't the right editing decision. Somebody rang that bell and they should know. Like, who is it? I don't know how to edit.
Instead of like pitting the audience against each other.
No.
This is more a question directed to both of you. Is I noticed that there was kind of like or a couple of basic stations you would go to, whether there were like items or materials that you would go to every once in a while. And did you ever have trouble, let's say, approaching these materials in different ways, or things that were most interesting for you, or maybe interesting for people to be involved with?
No, I think for me, in the piece, if she went to an area that she was interacting with materials and I didn't want to go there, I just went somewhere else.
Okay.
And I think you did the same thing. Yeah. So for me, that wasn't an issue.
Okay.
We've certainly been collaborating and talking about this work for 4 to 6 months. So it's or longer, and so,
almost a year. Like
almost a year. Yes. So, and it spins off of a collaboration. We did 3 collaborative performances at Essential Departures last summer, and so it's building on that work. So I think it's more evolution. I think we're really comfortable with that with each other. Yeah.
And the cyclical nature of things, returning to things that we've done in previous performances, returning to things within performance last night, and also adding in moments of rest. I felt just helped with that.
I thought it was really beautiful how long the audience wanted us to or allowed us to hold each other. I thought that was really sweet.
I was like looking over at like as you were doing that, I was looking at like I made a copy, and she was just kind of like Olivia. Sorry. And she was very got emotionally connected to it in a lot of ways. So I'm sure it hit people in similar ways as well.
Kai, were you going to say something?
I was wondering if you could say a little bit about your writing. I'm trying to remember your writing about using an external cue. Because what I was interested in with the external cues and starting and the stopping was how it was making visible some of the problematics of relating to external cue in terms of what is perceived as protection and how it's interacting with what you desire to do. So I was curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, we were thinking a lot about institutions and madness and control and regulation, and I think the police felt a little bit like that kind of mechanization and the futility of labor, like the cyclical
unending
approach was also looking at forms of domestic labor that are just staving off inevitable decay.
And we did go through several iterations of what to put for text in the space, what to leave for text in the space, because we didn't want to over choreograph people's impressions of the work. We wrote a couple different things.
We did a lot of writing.
Yeah. Well, certainly a lot of writing beforehand about the work and with each other and messages and emails, but then even what to leave in the space as text. And we went through lots of different things. Do we speak? What do we say? And throwing most of it out. And leaving it very bare. Stop and start our labor with the sound of a bell.
But we also did a lot of thinking about bells as resonant, empty spaces, and then the clogging of that space, and thinking about things like love and placeholders for love, like security and comfort and sympathy, and maybe how those things fill up resonant spaces and make them silent. And there are 2 of us kind of stuffing each other's mouths or stopping each other from speaking or having empty space to act.
It does seem like a very interesting mode of durational performance is like you could almost relate it to feminist, like labor-related work. It reminds me a little bit of the material labor piece that you did, where the audience was similarly, they had like kind of a parameters for engagement. So it was durational, but also was dealing with this idea of inside, outside, and control, and not control. What is futile? What completing a task? How would we know if we completed something together? Or these kinds of exchange.
Agrofems, piece, material labor.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us about that work? I'm not familiar.
Well, how long was it? 4 or 5 hours? 4 or 5 hours. And so I set up these like clear plastic pumps, 12 of them in a circle, and filled them all with various states of blue water. And then I had hoses connected to each one in a circle. And then I had the audience invited, and they were wearing like hazmat suits, so everybody was completely identityless as much as possible. Would join and pump for as long as they wanted, but some people I would tell, this was like behind the scenes, people didn't know this, some people I would tell to completely empty all of the pumps around the circle, and then some people I would tell them to fill them, and then some people I would tell them to only leave them half full. So people were working manically, doing like nonsense labor for basically 5 hours with like a big timer, and counting down, and shredding paper manually with this little manual paper shredder. And then every once in a while, as a reward, I would let them let off a smoke bomb. And that's basically like what people were doing. They were like working really hard, and then every once in a while I'd be like, you get to let off a smoke bomb. They'd be like, yes. And then also I created these family trees of labor. And so people would write down their grandparents, their grandparents, their parents, and then themselves, what professions each generation had. And it was very interesting. It was kind of like a social study. It was a social experiment that people were very willing to partake in.
But why did these two works need to happen for a long period of time? Maybe that seems like a stupid question.
It's not a stupid question.
No. Because labor happens for a really long time. Like most of us work a lot of hours during the day doing kind of dumb, repetitious tasks.
Because without the time, I don't think you have the evolution and the understanding of space and interaction, and you don't. When I do short form pieces, I'm less comfortable because for me, I think it needs to evolve over a certain number of hours for myself as a performer to find that meaning and to. I don't know, Màirèad, do you?
I guess it brings up ideas of change and transformation and how much you want to, or how you want to articulate your relationship to those things. If you want it apparent that something has changed or something has not changed or something has transformed within the space or something has remained the same.
Can I ask, was this the first piece of that length or approaching that length for either of you? And if no, maybe yes for Màirèad, no for Rhea. Have you done a piece before Rhea that was of a similar length, and did you treat the audience differently, or did you have any kind of engagement with them like you did with this piece, or was it this other kind of durational we've been talking about where you're just doing your thing and the audience?
Most of my work has been durational and has interacted with the audience. So most of my work cannot exist without the audience interaction, and does take place over time to create a sense of transformation or not non-transformation. But
right.
Yes.
Am I correct in remembering you did these for Valentine's Day?
Yes.
A year ago.
Yes, at Panoply Performance Lab at Milk Glass Apron, Sugar.
That would actually, in terms of audience participation, you had people write notes to their grandmothers, I believe. It was the first time, like, since my grandmother's passed away, I really forgot that side.
Yes, I asked them to write Valentine's notes to their grandmothers, and then I asked them what they remembered about her, and then I wove their grandmother's stories into each other's while braiding and around the room. So I had a series of threads, industrial thread, and I created braids around the room as I wove those stories together verbally. So there's text in the piece that could only evolve with the audience participation.
Do a transition. David was going to read this excerpt of a quote from Màirèad, actually, that could lead us into talking about non-grata, wild Torus, and how you both engage with the audience, and how it's kind of a very crucial element of your performances to have the audience engage. If that's all right.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm quoting from Màirèad's essay that's will soon be published. It's called Essential Departures. And she says, this quote, "Through performance, we have the power to act in these in-between places. Performance activates their kind of embodied understanding. It is immersive in sense and environment, yet significantly, it at once allows for insight." And so, I guess we're talking about the idea of performance and how the unique thing about performance it allows for this embodied understanding, whether you're performing or whether you're witnessing or the performance. It has this kind of concept of embodied understanding. And I guess we're countering that with the idea of more performances that lean towards more spectacle or more, let's say, visuals rather than, let's say, content. Is this what the argument we're talking about?
We could have that as an argument, or just kind of like put both of those ideas up in the air.
Yeah.
Talk about audience participation and also spectacle.
Yeah, I felt the term embodied understanding was a great term to measure how to really understand what performance is, or how to see if something has a performance. If something is a performance, if it has this embodied understanding.
Could you define what you meant by embodied understanding?
Yeah, I think it's a lot about empathy and a clarification about body knowledge, because a lot of spectacle, a lot of violence, a lot of sex definitely carries with it a visceral impact. But sometimes that visceral impact is overwhelming and it renders us incapable of speaking or sort of forming an understanding. And I think empathy is sort of the fine line there, or the place that I often try to reach between shock and aesthetics, is to really have insight and maybe not enter a space of trauma, but understand trauma with a little bit more.
What do you guys think of that, Wild Torus?
Yeah, we did a performance with Grata on Friday that was part of the Anarchist Art Festival, and it's kind of this mass spectacle because the setting of the festival was a church, very historic church, Judson Church in right in the middle of Manhattan. And so you're already coming with this context of history behind you, and then people working there are very devout, and we're Wild Torus.
Devout anarchists.
People working there are not anarchists, but they want to support, like the arts, so that's great. But Wild Torus is also kind of, we like to think of ourselves as like a Kunst cult, so an art cult, and then I think Grata is probably similar. I don't know they're from Estonia, so that's not really, they're all pagan, but with Law of Torus, to go into a church and perform with Grata at an Anarchist festival is kind of once in a lifetime opportunity. So we're very special for us. So yeah, everybody was expecting us to do something anarchic, create a spectacle, and we did that. The workers, the Justin Church staff was appalled, and in the middle of the performance wanted to shut the whole thing down due to the flames, maybe setting off the sprinklers and calling the fire department and being a huge disaster. So they just stopped, they basically pressed pause and started yelling at us in the middle of the performance, turning on the lights and everything. But we managed to keep going. So I think
none of us changed the thing they were doing. Like they continued.
Well, we stopped with the fire a little bit, but we did other things to replace that. And then I think it's important because the sublime level, that's really when someone is actually, on a meta level coming out from like the staff or something to intervene, and that really takes it to. This metaphysical understand or relationship with performance art, where like your whole reality is like shifting on its own.
I think it's important to use spectacle in a specific way, and sort of subvert spectacle as we sort of experience it generally and culturally, and not sort of that sort of beating you down into submission or not even like understanding. It's sort of kind of, but what is important for us is to create an active spectacle to where it's not a passive in relation to the viewer, but an active spectacle that it is kind of that embodied understanding. But it's something that goes beyond, the mundane and the normal, So what's really, an achievement for us is to push the audience to that engaged level, to where they kind of like do things that they wouldn't do normally, and kind of push them past their certain, boundaries of propriety or whatever. I mean, and that always depends on the audience in a great way. But what we always think about is like, okay, we're gonna create something that is like a spectacle, but it's a spectacle that is not allow you to just be passively taking it in, but it's going to that's what we think. Like, okay, this is passive, and this is, we do this thing, and it, subverts that, and it puts the audience right there in an uncomfortable position, but in a position where they have to, like, draw a line for themselves to what they're willing to do or not do, and potentially cross that line.
I think for this particular performance, though, given that the church was really big and kind of looked more like a host a wedding than host an anarchy festival, the audience was actually a little more passive, but there was a large audience, and it kind of reminded me of a sort of Hollywood spectacle, people with cameras, just entertainment, like what we were talking about earlier. It was more of this like entertainment mass spectacle, and it was only until like the end of the performance when the actual audience started taking the floor, and then like we had thrown baby powder everywhere, and so like people were sliding all over the baby powder and ruining this floor. I don't know if it's ruined, but kind of actively taking action after what we were doing, but like
it was a very specific moment, like after we were done and it was like over, and people had to like got in there in the middle and then just had to give everyone a group hug. It was like Like somebody's like, we gotta
Yeah.
just do a group hug right now. Right now, we all have to like get in a circle and like, get over this.
Yeah,
So,
like therapy.
That low level of engagement that exists in the audience manifested in that sort of like, oh my God, we gotta like take a breath and like hold ourselves. Hold each
I
other.
feel like the use of the spectacle is it's a very impactful tool that does encompass the viewer. What Al, people from us from Grata, it's like what we always want to do is make sure that we imprint on the viewer. Al hates the term act, like to act, to be fake.
Al
Baudrillard. Yeah, he definitely hates acting. It's like, and that's a part of the extremities that we go to, to imprint during these performances. If we wanted to symbolize blood, I'm a very symbolic person, and I don't always feel that the need to use, if I want to like symbolize blood, like red paint is cool for me, but non-grata pushes you past your own comfort zone, because if you push yourself past your own comfort zone, you're going to push the viewer past their comfort zone, and it becomes more of a branding of the mind, even though we're like, what I like to tell people is I might brand my body, and for that moment I feel the pain. You can smell, you can like use all your senses to kind of make this memory, that's always going to stay with the person who views it.
Because branding is an action that non-grata often does.
Yes. Branding, of course, yeah. It's one of the big things that we do on our performances, is alongside using fire. Fire is a big medium that we like to use for its symbolism as well. Fire destroys and creates. I always like to think of fire as like a forest fire. It destroys like thousands of acres, but at the same time, it makes it so much more fertile. And we, light ourselves on fire in many different aspects of symbolism. We did a performance in Norman, Oklahoma, at the University of Oklahoma's ceramics department for their Fuego Friday event that they were doing. The performance was named Hurricane Patricia. And so me and Oit Biebman, another member from Estonia, covered our bodies in ceramic clay, and then we were lit on fire to symbolize the creation of a new being and a new form of art, a new structure of art. And it is a spectacle, it is this grand thing that you don't really see a lot of people do, and I feel that since it is such a grand spectacle, it is such a grand impression that you leave on the people who see that.
I wanted to follow up on your idea of pushing people past their comfort levels or comfort zones. Was that part of like a person viewing or person performing?
Both.
Because I've performed with non-grata and several times, and it's definitely pushed me past my comfort levels in terms of like, as I thought about this a lot. I thought about this a lot, where I've rationalized it as I'm performing with non-grata, I'm doing something that I would not probably, is projecting, I guess, a persona that it's not normally my normal personality.
Right.
But as I'm thinking about it, I'm doing this in a live space in front of people, so maybe this is a part of me that I don't express every day.
Well, yeah, I feel that...
So in pushing past my normal comfort level of acting this way, it lets me act this certain way.
Well, I feel like when we're pushed past our comfort zones, we are forced to really look into ourselves, into our character, into the building blocks of our personality, and in doing so, I feel like you find a lot more than what you thought was there.
Yeah.
And I feel that the same goes for the audience as well.
Yeah.
I love to see the different reactions that go on as we perform.
Yeah.
Like in Holland, we were performing at this, I think it's called the Zebra Club, something like that. And it came to the time in this performance where Taya, aka Devil Girl, another member of Grata,
Taya Trust, yeah.
She climbed up on the table and branded my arm with a arrow that points towards myself. And at that moment, I was looking out into the crowd, and just to see how many different expressions were put at the same exact time gave me so much more understanding of the people that were witnessing. Some people cringed, some people just couldn't even bear to look at. Some people had these really sinister smiles on their face. And it kind of gives you this glance into the soul is what I feel. Both for yourself and for the audience.
You mentioned spectacle, and you mentioned spectacle, and I found that in writing press releases for Non Grata, Al has specifically told me not to use the word spectacle. And it's really hard to write a press release about Non Grata without the word spectacle. But I think maybe it's because I just wanted to get that out there. That I know he doesn't.
I think because people tend to take it the wrong way.
Well, you were saying that it's a non-passive spectacle.
Yeah.
I think he's worried that people will be
right.
passive.
So you have to explain the whole thing.
I agree with what Ming said. It was that some people they hear the word spectacle and they think theater.
Yeah.
And like I said, Al Paldrock hates theater. He hates acting. It has to be real. If it's not real, what's the point? You can go to the fucking movies and watch someone pretend. So, I feel as a performance artist, my job is to make whoever is watching me
feel the same way you're feeling, right?
Well, no, I don't like to. I don't want them to feel what I'm feeling. Because I know I do my performance, and the message is clear to me. But what I love about performance art is everyone who is watching it is going to walk away with a different type of perspective of what they just saw. Someone can see me my family is Pentecostal Christians. They're very almost culty Pentecostals, and so when they view a performance of Non Grata where I light myself on fire, their mind automatically goes to hell and brimstone and my son is burning in hell. This is what you're trying to portray to the audience, But then the person next to him sees that that phoenix, the being burned so that you can become new.
There's something interesting about that though. That hell, the purpose of the fires in hell is to cleanse.
Right.
That's why you're burning forever. So it's actually the same.
You never actually get it.
But I don't want them to have to feel like I feel.
Yeah.
I like the fact that they being the audience sees what it's like a mirror. They see into themselves. And their perspective that they see is because they're seeing it through the mirror of their own personality.
Yeah, we like to give them a model. This is when you could be an act this way. You could really there's really no difference between you and me. And for us, it's the sort of liberating personally and socially. So yeah, you don't necessarily.
Yeah, we don't necessarily want to scare people, and a lot of Non Grata, say flames, say branding people. You think shock performance art or something this is meant to be grotesque. This is meant to be a statement, a political statement. It basically something about violence.
But we're a little different.
And we work together. That's the thing. Wild Torus and Non Grata work together, and we actually, I feel Wild Torus really follows this whole spectacle theory, you know, like Guy Debord, this like, this society is so, you know, wound up in the spectacle that they're, like the media, like there's more like a commentary on like something specific as the media. So like, I don't know, we come from kind of these different backgrounds. Like I almost feel like Grata is a little more shock, and then like Torus.
And we're like more of a therapy after the shock.
Yeah.
Like it's okay. You can like, you know, you after this you can like you can be then you change. You can be.
We want people to like relate to us more than we want them to like, you know, go like freak out and like, you know, tell stories of the nightmare of what they saw or something. But like, it's more okay. You see it, you can tell that like this is actually not so different than your everyday life.
I feel like a big difference between both of your performances and like the stuff a lot of us learn in school about performance, like 1970s body pain performances. Those to me feel so alienating, and it's like they make it very clear that this is like a level of pain that I will never inflict upon myself, and it's like so deifying to see these people like Chris Bird and Marina Abramovich like going so hardcore on their body. But non-Grata and Wild Torus and a lot of the stuff I've seen, you may even use like a similar implement to like harm your body, but it's done in a way that makes me want to find like my own way to achieve this like transcendence through discomfort. And it's not alienating. It's more like going back to Màirèad's quote. It's more about creating empathy. And like the most successful of both of your performances that I've seen have created more empathy than alienation.
Well, I feel like there's also like a common like a misconception, and I do hear a lot of like, like non-Grata is like shock art, you know, and like, but we don't use, you know, like this, you know, like body mutilation, like this as a form of like, I just want you to like freak the fuck out, you know. It's like everything has its meaning, you know. We did a performance.
Does the audience have access to the meaning?
What's that?
Can the audience access that meaning?
I mean, that's up to the viewer. It's up to the viewer to see and connect. You know? It's up to us to try our best to portray this concept, you know, without, you know, a scripted words and, you know, content in that type of manner. We use a lot of that symbolism. Like in Pittsburgh, at the Temple of the Holy Horror, me and Peter Rosvik, noise musician performance artist from Finland, we stapled it. We had this big spool of wire or yarn, and we took turns passing it to each other and stapling it to our bodies. And if someone just like walked in and was like, "Oh, these guys are just like stapling themselves," I can see how they can view it. They can view it as like, oh, they're just like doing this to like fuck with people. But really, we're trying to represent this connectivity between like humans, you know, between us all. We're all connected in some way or another, you know. And we use this this extreme form to portray that connectivity.
But it's all pretty literal. Like most of it's not like, you know, it's all pretty much, you know, simple metaphors for things.
Like it's not a spectacle. Like this is like what you're looking at. Like I can kind of see
this for Grata, I think this fundamental thing that the interpretation is free. So it's like we're not telling you like how to interpret it. We have our ideas with our actions, but we don't say that you have to have the same ideas. Better than you do.
I've seen I haven't seen all of them, but the ones I've seen, Al's always doing a lecture, and it might be hard to hear him, but if you focus on what he's saying, he is giving a lecture that ties everything together, and he'll walk over and say, the guy's stapling, and say, this is a metaphor for like the connection of bodies, and then he'll walk up to Hannes and say, and this is illustrating this other part, and he'll put notes and diagrams on the wall, which is explaining everything that's happening and how it's connected.
I mean,
But
on one
this-
hand, you
this-
can't take him so literally because he is kind of like the madman who's just maybe spewing out words.
Yeah, but it is all connected. It's connected and always has a theme. And I think he's a serious person, like you
No,
said,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
doesn't like anything fake. And I've seen lots of meetings that happen, many meetings before each performance, and everyone knows exactly what they're going to do. And I think he takes these lectures seriously and does tie it all together.
Yeah, I think that's a misconception about non-grata, where it's just like this random actions, people doing random things, and they're literally just mini performances that are happening all together at once that make up one big large performance. That's basically what non-grata is.
I wanted to shift for a little bit. I know Olivia just arrived. I really wanted to hear your thoughts on, I know you want to talk about Màirèad and Rhea. We did spend a lot of time talking about them. But what about, you did a performance recently at in a house. It was Huesa's birthday party. And if you feel cool about it, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the artist, the performer, engaging the audience, and how you use the audience in a really interesting way that provided you with like an element of feedback, almost like what we talked about at the very beginning, a physical discourse with your piece.
Yeah, I think with that one, I was really trying to do something I had not done before that was going to be directly engaging the audience. It was supposed to be a different feel where I was rejecting the slow, respectful observance, and I wanted people to get rowdy. So I was fucking shit up, and I wanted people to.
Can you describe it a little bit?
Yeah, so Lisa has a strip pole in her basement, and so I did like a grotesque striptease. Not actually using the pole even that much. I was just like, I knew that pole was there, so I was like, okay, that's fine. I did end up using the pole. I tore it out of the ceiling also, but that was not planned.
Nice.
Yeah, so the ideas behind that was very much entertainment instead of careful, meticulous symbolism, which I had used before. This was really much more of spectacle, and I feel like it was very successful, and I wanted to do more stuff like that.
And what about what you gave the audience?
Yeah, at the beginning, because of the sexy vibes, I handed out like fake dollar bills and cash, and it was clear. Obviously, the audience knew that they were supposed to throw it back at me. That didn't really happen until towards the end, when I reached a kind of cash. And
I'm going to interrupt you. Could you move closer to the mic because people are talking in the other room, and I want to make sure we can hear what you're saying. There's a seat right next to Jill. I'm.
Let's talk really loud. Let's talk louder. Okay, so at that point, it was clear people were psyched, and that I was, it was supposed to be 12 minutes, so it was like naturally not going to go very long, but that energy peaked at a certain point. It was great. People were popping champagne, which was not planned, but it was so perfect. And that kind of immediate feedback was like, hell yeah, people love this. I'm happy about what I did.
And it coincided with like these climactic moments in your performance that had nothing to do with like your level of nudity, like what you would expect, kind of like the stripper dynamic.
There was no full nudity either at any point. I was wearing like a little one piece. Yeah, but like the big reveal that I was most excited about was out of 12 minutes, probably like the 9 or 10 minute mark, I had been holding ink in my mouth the entire time and let it spill out. And no one knew that was coming. And it was really...
That's when the dollars flew.
Was that when it was? I don't actually know the chronology.
Yeah.
People started throwing
That's what I'm saying. It wasn't tied into your normal
Excellent.
expectations. It was like when you did this crazy thing, like the mouth, or when the pole tore out of the ceiling.
Yes.
That was like cash flow.
Okay, great. And so at that point, people weren't really throwing it until then.
Right.
And it's like, okay, now we see something we like. We're going to talk about it.
So it became like a similar way to how they use their audience interaction. It became this like barometer for people to say how much they enjoyed that action.
Yeah, very much so. And people were not just throwing money. People were like hollering and shouting and like, yeah! And that's what I wanted. I wanted people to get psyched for that. So,
I think that's also a difference in context, because some of my most favorite performance times in my life have happened in people's homes.
Yes.
And that's a thing that like I really miss in New York. That like when I lived in Virginia, we didn't have a space, so we would perform in all of our apartments and have like festivals, quote unquote, where everyone obviously at the end of the night was sleeping on the floor in sleeping bags. But before that, there'd be a lineup, or we would like go to some weird warehouse and then go back home, and then there'd be more readings and performances, and in the yard. And that's the thing I kind of miss in New York, that intimacy of space and the different context of when you're in a home, it's totally different. You feel like you can do things or not do things that you can and can't do in a gallery / performance venue. Yeah, that's it. It's something I miss. And
there's something I wanted to say about that.
Let's bring it back.
I think bringing also entertainment into that, I think the bigger the space and the less intimate the audience members feel, less committed to participate, less committed to be vulnerable as well. Where the more intimate the space, the more it feels like performance art than performing art.
Well, it's kind of interesting you said it was a birthday party and it's like someone's house. So yeah, this is almost like if you're... Oh.
We're talking about your birthday festival.
Happy birthday. Yeah, I know, but it's like this totally normative event where, I don't know, actually maybe a stripper would show up. So,
I was like,
I don't know. Yeah, it's like, it's kind of ironic.
But I think wherever you are, like, you know, you can create a certain level of intimacy by how, you know, you stage the performance and how you interact with the audience. And yes, some places are obviously like much more of a challenge and something institutional. But then you all almost have to like, yeah, you take that as that challenge. And then, I don't know, like for us, it's very important, you know, the experience of the audience. The audience is like our medium, you know, so like what we do in our own bodies and performance, you know, is sort of like a prelude to like how we want the audience to react and interact. And we always, you know, you think about it, you want to bring that interaction and that immediacy and intimacy wherever you're creating it. And it's almost better to kind of like go in somewhere where it's, you know, counter to the nature of the space and create that.
I'm gonna.
What about outside?
Outside?
No, yeah,
I'm being outside. Most of the work that I've been doing over the last year
outside is
like
good.
Outside.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I admire that a lot.
Yeah.
But there are like things like when you're making, you know, I mean, obviously you can't really take fire outside because then you have issues of like the fire department show.
No. It's actually better to take fire outside.
It's better outside. You know, you don't really need like a law, like a permit to like light yourself on fire.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably true.
Yeah.
Actually, that's probably not true. I bet you do. I bet you need some kind of camping.
It's all about open environment. Like some places you can, some places you can't. But
it depends.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, yourself you can. As long as there's the open fire.
I guess what I'm getting at is like, is it possible? Like, I actually feel maybe it's just because I've been going to the same spaces for years now. But like when I'm at Gray Space or Panoply, like I do feel very at home. Like I do, and Panoply is a home. And I definitely, like, I've only been to Torus like once or twice, and you guys work there, but it also is very intimate. And like, I do think that partially that is the scale, but I also think that that's part of the perspective of the space. Like, that's what the space lets people who come there do.
Yeah.
And I think that you could have, like, that space over there, fairly large. Like, I think that it would feel intimate if people were to perform here because Ming would create that.
Yeah, and the performer would create that too.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna counterpoint and say that intimate performances do not work in more open spaces.
They don't want
You can't just say that.
I'm gonna say
They could work.
I'm going to say
it's the most intimate.
Wow, you're challenging.
No, well, I mean, slow ritual performance type of performance, and it was like this performance in this space does not work at all.
But look, yes, it didn't work, but like I say, we have succeeded in that because we stopped doing that places. But I think it's like, it could work. It's just you really have to try really hard.
What we did was go downstairs in the basement and reject the stage.
Yeah.
We didn't want the stage. We didn't want the dining room. We didn't want the bar. We said, let's go downstairs where there's really just like a black box.
Yeah, that was much better.
Yeah,
but
that's
that's a different space between the stage and upstairs because
when you put a stage up, that's.
Do you
that's
believe
a
that intimacy has to do with the space available or the people there?
The program.
I think the space available, let's say at Torus or Panoply Performance Laboratory, where the audience is not necessarily has the control of being away, being able to walk away.
Yeah, there's not a line.
You're forced to engage with it at some level.
I think that's arguably the same at Bizarre Bar, but because it is a bar, you walk in with this like preconceived notion of like, oh, we're gonna get wasted and have a party, and
we're gonna watch some freaks.
That's very antagonistic in an audience to like not have them be open to any experience. They want a specific experience already going.
But we would like go and like knock people's drinks over. We're just like bang on their tables and shit, and just like
he's talking about creating intimacy. I think and it is, but it's intimate with like in a one-to-one. Like it's an immediate. It's like you and me right now in this moment when I snap this drink out of your hand. That's intimate as fuck.
But it's not
Also
accessible
like
at
very
all.
fleeting and fast.
That's not accessible. People will go there and think, I want to see a performance. Somebody smacked a drink. That's fucked up. That's not art. That's an asshole. And people are not open. People are not open to it yet. I feel like you have to ease into it and ask them and not tell them, or else they will push you when they won't.
We were trying to get their attention, and they were like not even paying attention.
The thing is, though, they also we perform there so much. Like we felt like assaulted by them a lot of times. Like you talk about the sexual gaze at the beginning of this, and then you talk about your striptease. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. At a house party, you do a striptease. It's almost like cute, like and intimate, and like this almost like a more powerful thing. But you do it at a literal bar, and then like people think that this is like the time. And you're like, I'm a performance artist, I'm a nude artist. And they're like, no, you are like entertainment, you are naked. I'm going to do it.
I think we're getting back to our previous I think we're getting back to our previous arguments of entertainment and performance and spectacle.
And how much it depends on context and where it's happening.
I want to say a lot about that. I feel like when you especially are making yourself vulnerable that way as like a sexual spectacle, we've seen this a million times before. That's where I really take like the subversive aspect of it. If they don't respond that way, go ahead and knock their drink over and like turn the violence back on them.
Well, see what?
Or just create imagery that is not appealing. Create imagery that's repulsive. Like they're paying attention to you and they're like, oh wait, that's gross.
Right.
I thought this was just going to be hot, but it's not.
Right. Because it's both hot and gross at the same time.
Exactly. That's what
I've used aggression in performance before for the purpose of pissing off the people that we're dealing. When we were in Marseille, I wanted to embody, this figure of like capitalism, like the government, Big Brother, always looking down on you. And I had this riot suit on and a gas mask, and I would grab a balloon, like I had various balloons that were filled with like paints, like different types of paints, some with water, and I would walk up to the people in the audience, and I would give them this balloon, but then like I'd push them over, or like smack it out of their hand or something, because I purposely wanted those people to be mad. I wanted them to be mad and like see me as this form of, like I'm this fucking bully. I'm the government. I'm like, I'll give you this like this thing of water, this water balloon, but then I'll like fucking push you over and like spit on you or something, And then what I ended up doing was I stood on this pedestal, and I just flicked off the audience. And then they just naturally started to pummel me with these, water balloons and like balloons of paint and stuff, and it played in so perfectly to what I wanted to portray. It's totally asshole-ish if you're in a fucking bar and like a performance is like slap, like go buy a fucking another one. I was like that. It is shitty, but I feel like it can also be used as a good tool. To
as long as there's a good reason.
Prove a point.
Yeah, I think power, is this people, so much like when we did the Anarchist festival, it's like, there's a power diagram set, and there's the people at the top and the people at the bottom, and you want to, get angry at the people at the top because we're all together, which is true. But I don't know. Then you think about, like, I'm from Washington D.C., and like you think about the people who are in power, supposedly, and they're like old guys, or they're kind of like, they're humans, and this human aspect of that can play out in performance too, like audience and performers, like. Where the person supposedly in power is actually vulnerable to the audience who can lash out at them or something.
I have a question for like everyone actually. Who feels like performing, like doing performance art is about entertainment? Because I've heard that word thrown a lot in conversation.
I'm currently favoring that. Personally.
What's entertainment?
That's a question.
Let's start with definition.
When I think of entertainment is just to be, you're just basically like performing to like make the people that are there happy and have a good time.
I think that is entertainment. There is that art. But you could also take it like a little bit subtly, and I think we've already been talking about that, where it's like an acknowledgement of the audience.
Yeah.
Like for me, like entertainment could be just that, where there is a consideration of the audience. And in some extreme forms, it's like I'm considering them so much, I'm going to do whatever they want, so I get that money. Or it's like I'm going to do this performance piece that's very like personal, and I got to get it out, but I'm going to really think about where I am, where the audience is, how they're feeling, and I'm going to tailor it so that their experience of it can be as successful as I want it to be.
Yeah,
I like that.
So for me, it's like that's the level of entertainment that I think should be present in performances. And sometimes when you feel it isn't,
not a great word for it. I think there should be a better word for what you're
For me, what it means is that like, when I think about entertainment, I want the pieces to be entertaining. All that means to me is I don't want the audience to be bored.
Yeah.
Like they might hate it, they might love it, they might be puzzled, they might be disgusted, but they want to see what I'm going to.
How much do you care about the audience being bored? Yeah.
But this is like I think attractive is much better like word for it than entertainment, because as I understand like entertainment, then it's like something where you don't questionize anything.
Yeah.
You just like
it's passive. It's passive.
But the main concept of the art is questioning everything.
And I guess that's why I asked the question, because I feel similar. When I hear the word entertainment, I hear just like consumerism. It's just like just like sit here and absorb. There's no thinking behind it.
Right, but I think the root of it was like this relationship where it's like for the audience. And I think we've come to a certain point where the audience is often really devalued, and their experience like means shit compared to what the artist has to get out. And it's something that I kind of feel conflicted about.
I think that's reactionary.
Why are we doing this in the first place? It's not to like share it with the people who are there in the present space. That's what makes this shit special, is that like you can only truly experience it if you're there right then. So if the audience is like not enjoying it, if they're tired of what they're seeing, like I think that's a failure.
I know a lot of performance artists, and pretty much all the ones I know, always consider the audience. And I've seen theater and dance where you have a rehearsal, you have a director, and you do the same piece, exact same piece, and everywhere you go. that isn't considering the audience. They want the audience to see that piece, but they're not. And they say that every night is different, but when you do a performance piece, you're going to cater it to who's there with you.
Yeah, much more adaptive.
And
you adaptive, yeah.
yeah, and I forgot the other time.
There is this, in addition to what you're saying, Olivia, I do think that there, over time, like it's not that contact or intimacy between performances happens only in the room. I think that's very important, the presence of the witnesses, and that there isn't like a block of these are the people, the audience, and these are the artists, and all those kinds of dynamics. But also over time, like in communities or like groups of performance artists, and I think we do have to be honest that often our audiences are dominated by other artists and performance artists, that there is a dialogue that happens between the pieces, and it's possible for people to share their experiences. And when it's their turn, and then like next weekend it's going to be your turn, that we can listen and be patient with each other. And sometimes ideas are complex and have to be layered, or sometimes it is I don't think everyone is bored by a resting state, or by details, or by something that's repetitive. I don't think we can take for granted that that's boring.
I think when we move towards more entertainment in performance, I think the argument that you had, where you made the question, is this performance or just amateurish theater? And I think when a performance is more about entertainment or does not consider the audience, it's putting up that fourth wall and becoming, I'm just going to do this piece in front of you, and you don't have any engagement, or there's no thought with it other than I'm doing these actions.
Right. And then it starts to become similar to theater, but we often don't have that rigorous training in theater, so it looks like just bad amateurish theater.
Yeah.
But maybe it's more like circus, not like theater maybe. I mean, like circus is something that is just like entertaining, but I mean theater is also like versionizing and like like art.
I mean, I think
also
the one main thing that separates is like rehearsal doing the same thing, and the other thing is that fourth wall, which some, I guess, experimental theater, breaks that and then kind of blurs that line. But yeah, traditionally theater is not really dependent on the audience. The content of the performance is going to be pretty much the same, and but I think it's hard to. I mean, some performance can really kind of fall into that, but I don't think that that's really that much of a danger. I don't think that people anybody that we know or we see has kind of that's going to the theater thing. Even I
think it happens in and out of people's own practices. Like it's not one person all the time, but
I'm sure
you can slip in and out of that different pieces.
I mean, we came into performance art, I think, as from the visual art standpoint, but then also a lot of this autobiographical, and then we wanted it to be kind of pure performance art for the contemporary context. But we've just started kind of hosting workshops with kind of quote unquote amateurs who don't really have maybe, or even if you're teaching a class that's just performance art, you're teaching performance art, how do you teach performance art exactly? Is it just
you do a performance?
Is it a step-by-step thing? Here's a symbol, and then here now you want to do this, and a lot of these things are kind of formulaic, and you can see that repetition, just keep repeating, just don't stop, or whatever it is, it's something that has either been done before, and then but how do you make it meaningful? And then what these lines between theater, entertainment, visual art, or or performance art. It's hard to kind of unless you're a performance artist, you can't really teach exactly what to do engineering school or something.
But I'm not just saying that there's no But like performance ideas, there's like just thousand ways to do it. So this attractive part is really like, and professional part is like important in that sense.
What about performing without an audience?
I'm cursing your own. You haven't spoken yet.
No, that totally counts. That totally counts.
Because I think I do that. Go.
No.
I'm more interested in what
Let's just go live.
I had one question. Why the word boring comes out as a very negative thing all the time?
I think boring.
Yeah, you like boring.
I do too.
Well, the reason I started to make performance art in the 80s because I saw some performance pieces I really hated. And then later I liked them because they changed me. I hated them because they fucked me up. They were my fault. Yeah, but sometimes they were boring. So boring is for me an element of language in performance. It's at the same level as any other element. It's not better or worse. It depends on the way you use it. So for me, it's not really an issue.
I think boring it happens when there's like little to no connection. So when the audience feels just kind of like a drift.
Yeah, but sometimes in time you don't relate it. But when if you stay long enough, then suddenly something is different.
Yeah.
But you have to be bored for a certain period of time through a certain kind of experience to get the meaning of the experience. Because for me, the performance art is something that will change me as an audience. As a performance, I'm trying to do that. I know it's kind of pretentious, but it's what I'm trying to do. Sometimes I fail, but I mean, it's so. This is the difference also between entertaining the audience or try to really give an experience to the audience that may maybe give them something more significant than entertainment. And boring is just part of the language.
I think in gray space, from my experience, and you all can tell me what you think, I think that when we tend to lose audience is when people come in to do a piece where they have that fourth wall. Yeah. Like they haven't quite gotten this as performance art, even if they come a lot. And they're like, I've got my rehearsed routine and I'm going to do it for you. And our audience is so used to having people come that they engage with in an energy-wise way, even if it's just like that.
Yeah.
But the ones they walk away from, I don't know if bored is the right word, but I think feeling not connected to the work and knowing that you're watching some rehearsed piece that had nothing to do with your being there, I think that's when people get bored.